The views and opinions heard on this show do not necessarily reflect the views of the host.
There had to be someone, not something, because things were out, second law of thermodynamics. There had to be someone without beginning or end who had the power and the knowledge, the wisdom, the incredible, infinite intelligence to put all this together, from the organization of the atom to the cosmos and so forth.
When we look at the many examples of God's power, it should invoke a sense of reverence and awe in our hearts.
Truly, our Creator is the God of wonders, and the greatest wonder is His immeasurable love.
Welcome to another edition of Real Spiritual Talk Radio. I'm your host, Lamont Gates, bringing you the world of faith, metaphysicalism, and spirituality. Today's show will be discussing near-death experiences, and my special guests presenting their account. Let's get it started. Welcome back to Real Spiritual Talk Radio. Today's broadcast will present the first of a series of shows centered around one of my favorite and most fascinating topics regarding spirituality, and that is the near-death experience. Near-death experiences, or NDEs as they are also called, are lucid experiences that occur typically after one is pronounced clinically dead. The experiencer speaks of dying, having their conscience or soul leave their physical body, become an unseeable witness to their own physical body and any activity happening at the time, while being a part of another realm to which they are soon led into. They express having no physical body at this point. They may see an extremely illuminating light or light beings, typically consisting of past relatives or friends who are deceased. Some see angels, and others see non-material entities. Many say there is an overall light being with a personality that exudes a feeling of love beyond human comprehension. Some call this God, others refer to it as a collective conscience of all that exists, or both. One thing is for sure, millions of people have had such experiences, and although the interpretations of what they experience may differ once they return, one listening to or reading these accounts can't help but see the similarities in the process of the experience. Today, my guest is what's known as a near-death experiencer who has come to share her story. Ladies and gentlemen, joining us via telephone is near-death experiencer Melissa Ann.
Thank you so much for having me.
Glad to have you here. I myself am a massive NDE enthusiast, as I call myself. And after reading the book Life After Life by Dr. Raymond Moody, I found myself not being able to put any other near-death experience book down. In fact, thanks to the internet and the interconnection all throughout the world, many people who do not have book deals or movie deals or anything of that nature can also share their accounts, which only adds to the relevance. You and I are both a part of a particular near-death experience group on Facebook, and as I was going through your account, I noticed that your near-death experience actually began very early, correct?
You're correct. I was only 6 years old.
So you don't really have much of a life story prior to your NDE, but childhood memories do certainly exist. Why don't you discuss with us your upbringing, specifically any belief systems that were taught to you as a child from parents or other adults?
Well, I was brought up Catholic. We spent a lot of time at church, especially with my great-grandmother when I was little, at least prior to my near-death experience. So that was really instilled in me. I had a pretty neglectful childhood, actually. It was interesting that, I had the love in my life that I did have prior to my near-death experience. I would say it was very little save for my great-grandmother that brought me to church with her quite frequently.
Okay, so being of the Catholic tradition at the time as a young girl, was there a fear of God or of an afterlife based on your religious upbringing? I say this only because many complaints of even long-lasting Catholic parishioners is that fear was instilled in them from a young age on these things.
Prior to my NDE, hell was a belief in my home. It was definitely, if you do bad, you'll go to hell. I heard that even at a young age. So there was definitely a fear of that prior to my NDE. But I would say after my NDE, things changed dramatically for me.
As they usually do. Let's discuss it. Since your NDE was so early in life, as I implied earlier, you really didn't have the same obvious experiences built up like that of an adult NDE. But there is an author named Dr. Melvin Morse who dedicated research to studying children who had near-death experiences. So these experiences are certainly happening to children. So what was it that prompted your near-death experience at the age of 6?
So I had a lot of seizures when I was younger. And this particular day, I had a quite bad seizure, and my breathing had stopped for so long that my heart actually ended up stopping.
Okay, so were you rushed to the hospital, or were you not able to make it?
I did not make it to the hospital. My breathing had stopped and my heart had stopped prior to the ambulance getting there. And that was about the time that I had my NDE. I remember seeing my mother carry my limp body around the corner of the building we lived in to the ambulance from about 15 feet in the air of the whole thing.
Okay, so that sounds like an out-of-body experience where you could see both yourself and the events happening while observing from outside of your physical body. So walk us through what happened after that.
So I remember seeing the scene, and from behind me there was this bright light that was just encompassing me. And I wasn't looking directly at the light, but it was shining all around me. And it was so warm. I know a lot of people say that they don't feel physical things in their NDEs, but for me, I just felt like the warmth of this bright light around me. It was like I saw the scene that was going on, but I was not connected to the scene. I had no care about seeing my lifeless body. It was more of what I was connected to, I guess you could say spiritually, through the experience, just feeling all these, I guess a lot of people would call them souls around them, like souls of everything that ever has lived. And it also felt like souls of, babies, people who hadn't, had life on earth yet. So it was just a warm, welcoming feeling of love and just pure peace.
Very interesting. So you saw lives that had lived prior, and you saw lives that were yet to come into the physical plane. I've read a few accounts of people who say that the soul has a premortal beginning, and that many choices are made prior to taking on human flesh and coming to our world. Do you feel that this is what you may have encountered here with the young souls you saw?
Yeah, I would definitely say that was the case. I don't think that, I do strongly believe in reincarnation since my NDE because it's just something that I felt while I was on the other side. But I wouldn't say that, you die and then you come back to Earth. You may die and you become a child soul again, and you might spend quite a bit of time on the other side before you decide, you want to come back here and your soul wants to live on Earth again. It didn't feel like, they were in any rush to get here whatsoever. And I would say from what I felt, it felt like I had been there before. The place that I went to when I died felt more like home than here on Earth.
Did you notice any familiar entities like relatives, friends, or family that had moved on?
So the only person that really felt familiar, and I didn't see them directly, but I could feel their presence with me, was my grandfather, who had actually passed a year prior to my experience. In my near-death experience, I was encompassed by this light, and I was experiencing these feelings. And I felt, I don't want to say a hand on my shoulder because it wasn't like a physical touch, but the presence of a hand on my shoulder and a push back towards my body. And I strongly believe that that was my grandfather saying that, I wasn't done here yet, and he was the one that sent me back.
So you felt a push. Did you hear or feel the words of anyone?
So a lot of people say that they heard "it's not your time." I would say that, I don't want to say it was like telepathic communication because I didn't hear any word saying it's not your time, but it was like the feeling was communicated, it's not your time.
Got you. And I have heard people say they were likewise pushed back, blown back like wind, or even sucked backward into a tunnel.
I did go through a tunnel.
You did? What was that like?
So when I was pushed back, everything was pitch black, but I could feel myself being sucked down this really long tunnel before I went back to my body. And it's funny because it felt like it was a very long time, but really my experience only lasted a matter of minutes.
Right. Now, did you move through a tunnel on your way into the realm after your out-of-body experience? I know you mentioned the presence of a light after leaving your body. Do you think this light somehow transported you over?
I would say that the light brought me there. I really went from, 1 second I was unconscious on Earth, and the next thing I knew I was looking at my body, so.
You said something earlier that was very important. You talked about having no attachment to your body. And I go through this constantly over and over with my mother and some of my older relatives who have an older custom and tradition of preparing for their funeral and wanting their corpse to be well dressed so that when the people who are attending the funeral can look upon them, with such glory. I try to tell them on many occasions that the reality is that many people who have near-death experiences, like yourself, look upon their body as they're over it and care nothing for it. It's as if you're wearing a ripped jacket, you remove it, take it off, and you have no care for it. Such is also the soul. Once it leaves the body can no longer be worn anymore and has no benefit. Nonetheless, after being pushed back into your body, did you find it difficult to communicate what you had just saw?
So it had taken me probably a couple of years before I said anything to anyone. And the only person I said something to was my mother one day. And despite the fact that I could in detail describe the scene which I would have not known about otherwise, she was really unaccepting of it and just told me that I had imagined it and I must have heard about it, and that's why I was able to remember it. But I know what I experienced was real because I experienced it at the time of the event, at the time of my death. I had carried this story with me that long before sharing it with anybody, and it was really hard to put into words because I was only still 6 years old at the time, and it was just very, very hard to put into words, and I wasn't really able to talk about it and put it into words again until I was an adult. I don't think I mentioned it to anyone until I was at least 18, 19 years old.
And you aren't alone. Many adults who come back from an NDE describe how difficult it is to describe their experience, so I can imagine a 6-year-old trying to. But moving on, was there any extraordinary senses that came back with you in your post-near-death experience? For example, some say after their experience they come back with precognition, or a slight ability to heal, or no fear of death, and so on.
I would definitely say that I don't fear death at all, and that's not saying that I want to die, but I know where we go is just such a warm and loving place that it's uncomparable to what you feel on Earth for love. I definitely can say that I've had some experiences where, for example, when I was 10 years old, I dreamt of a body in a park by my house. And then a while later, a couple months later, I was driving by the park with my grandmother, and she asked me if I heard about the body that they just found in the park by my house. So that was interesting that I was able to, I guess, assume that this body was going to show up near my house. The man that they had found had actually committed suicide, so his death was much more traumatic than mine was. I would say that sometimes I am aware of conversations that are being had about me without being present for them, or being had about people I care about. I would say that, I'm very in tune to other people's feelings and emotions, much like when people say that they are empaths. I can walk into a room or even not even be in the same building as someone and know that something is wrong if it's somebody that I'm close to or somebody that I care about.
So you did come back with a sort of sixth sense power, would you say?
I would say so. I don't consider myself to be a psychic or anything, and it's nothing that I ever can say that, okay, now I want to know how this person is feeling. I can't choose when it happens. It's very randomized, but yes, I would definitely say that I have some sort of sixth sense.
So you're not going to give me the winning lottery numbers today, are you?
No. I know, I wish I had that ability.
Okay, so I was thumbing through some of your posts on this NDE group we both belong to on Facebook, and you also had a theory on life and death, and you included a scientific perspective to it. Can you explain that for us?
So I'm an avid believer of the multiverse theory. I don't want to get way too deep into it, but it's definitely something that I just felt when I died. It feels like there's this collective consciousness of energy and souls from Earth, but it also feels like, it was from somewhere else that's close by that mirrors what we may be living through here, but with slight differences, if that makes any sense.
I read where experiencers say they have their souls encapsulated in their bodies here on the physicalist plane, but that when they went into the otherworldly place that you visited during your NDE, they noticed what was a carbon copy of their soul, but just a much higher version of it. Is that at least remotely close to what you felt?
I would say that that's a good way to put into words what I felt when I don't want to say the other side because I don't really believe that it exists as another side. I believe that it exists as planes. Like if you picture layers of paper on top of each other, it exists here all around us. We may not see it, but the life on the other side is here on Earth as much as it's, anywhere else in the universe or in another universe that may be like our universe.
You also spoke about collectivism. Many say that they felt one with all that exists, both in that plane and on Earth. Many also say that God, or some call it the Source, is also one with all things, yet at the same time being separate. Would you say that's what you felt?
I would definitely say it's just one giant collective consciousness. It's just one giant feeling of love. I don't believe in a God because of my experience, because I didn't feel any one thing to be any more powerful than any other soul that I may have felt while I was, I keep saying on the other side, but I don't like to use that phrase. I mean, it's just such common language, but a lot of the common language they use for these experiences, I wouldn't say are particularly what I felt. But I don't believe in any one power being stronger than the other. I believe that we are all interconnected. We are all reincarnated. We have all lived in each other's shoes at some point on this earth. And some people believe that your soul has to go through, different lives before it can reach a certain enlightenment, I guess you would say. And that may very well be what happens.
Going back to reincarnation, there are many who believe this also has a karmic debt attachment. In other words, based on your deeds or misdeeds of your previous life, you may come back with a debt to pay based on what you did to others. However, I noticed you did not believe karmic debt was involved.
I don't. I believe that it's randomized, really. I mean, you may be a very wealthy person in this life who did terrible things. That doesn't mean you're not going to come back again as a wealthy person. I feel like the universe has all this energy. And if you picture like a bubble, there's only so much a bubble can take before it pops. So what it felt like to me was eventually some of this energy has to come back to Earth. And that's when you're born into your new life. And it may or it may not have anything to do with karma, but from what I felt, it didn't feel like karma was a factor there.
There are many arguments on the topic of reincarnation. In fact, Dr. Michael Newton has written several books on the subject after regressing many of his patients, he's a psychiatrist by the way, during hypnosis sessions, who said reincarnation was a choice based on certain master teachers telling them in this spiritual realm we are speaking on, wanting them to come back because returning would evolve the soul even more. And that the purpose of life, as you said, was to love, but also to learn. Learn as in experiencing all of what this realm could offer in terms of humility, justice, sorrow, pain, altruism, etc. Who really knows? I think you are a great candidate to discuss this simply because you've been there. Nonetheless, you also speak about a recurring dream in one of your posts. Do you want to speak on that a bit?
Sure. I've had a recurring dream actually since I came back from my near-death experience. And what I see is myself with my legs and my arms bound in each direction, and I'm actually being pressed to death. Now, at the age that I started having this dream, I was totally unaware that this was a thing. So I just remember seeing stone after stone after stone laid upon my body. I don't see anyone else present. I just see these stones appearing on top of me. And then the next thing I know, the chains are gone that were holding me, the stones are gone, and I'm in a very, very dark place. And ahead of me in this dark place is a light, and I would say that is the same light that I saw when I crossed over. And there was a staircase leading up to the light. And I remember trying to climb the staircase, and I'd get about midway up this giant staircase, and I could never quite make it to the top, and then I would wake up.
How old were you when these dreams began?
I would say it was almost immediately after my near-death experience that started. So I would say I was still 6 years old.
Are you still having these dreams?
I had them a lot more frequently after my NDE. On rare occasion, I will still have the same dream, and the details never change. It's the exact same dream each time I have it. But after my NDE, it was constant. I would fall asleep, and almost every night at the beginning, I would fall back into this dream.
Why do you believe this dream is recurring constantly? Many say recurring dreams are unresolved issues in a past life. It sounds like what you're seeing in this dream is similar to the 17th century method of attempting to get a confession out of a man during the Salem witch hunt trials. They would lay the man down, tie him, and bound him, and place heavy bricks upon him until he confessed to being a part of witchery, being a part of consulting with the devil, etc. Do you believe it could be a past life issue?
I'm conflicted on this because a large part of me feels like it's a past life, and then there's a part of me that feels like, I might have brought back over with me someone's memories that I may have crossed paths with on the other side. So those are my two feelings on the matter. I can't concretely say which it is. Eventually I'd like to meet with a medium and hopefully investigate this more.
There are also past life regression therapists who specialize via hypnosis on this service. Actually, there are many out there who have recurring dreams. For example, mine has been all about bridge collapses. The Golden Gate Bridge, the George Washington Bridge, the Brooklyn Bridge, and even smaller bridges. Have you ever considered a past life regression therapist?
I would absolutely be interested in doing that and in finding out more about this dream. I would love to be able to date it to exactly when in history this may have occurred. Because as I said, I didn't see any other people in this dream. I could tell that there were other people there, but I have no idea what they were wearing or what time period it may have looked like it would have been, or even what region in the world it may have been.
Very interesting. A lot of mysteries, even when we sleep. But the fact that you started having them after your near-death experience may point to something spiritual indeed.
I definitely don't disagree with that at all.
Is there anything else you'd like to tell people about death or that otherworldly place that we don't have a word for?
Just not to fear death. I know that, it's hard to tell someone who has earthly emotions not to feel bad or grieve when someone that they love does pass over, but I am someone who truly believes that we do go to a better place, what I like to refer to as home when we die.
And that is well attested in much of the near-death experience literature. Question, do you no longer practice any form of Catholicism?
Though I don't really claim a religion. I know there are a lot of religions that believe in reincarnation. That's really the only belief that I hold firmly, but not in a way you'd read in any book.
How has your family received your account now that you're older?
I would say they're definitely still skeptical, but telling a lot of people about what I experienced seems to bring them peace in some sense. So they may be skeptical on whether or not, I actually had this experience, but hearing it in my words the way that I describe it is just so unique, especially coming from someone who's been talking about this since they were 6 years old.
And your story hasn't changed. They could certainly consider that.
Yeah, that's true. The details definitely are, it's almost like, and you hear this a lot with people who have had near-death experiences, even if they were 6 years old when they had it and they're 48 years old now, it's almost like it happened yesterday. It's probably more of a vivid memory that I have than what I ate for breakfast this morning.
And that's another fascination. The fact that this memory from age 6 till now remains stronger than what you recall having for breakfast. Many say they come back with the same extreme vivid memory of the account. It's as if the memory is stamped into you.
Yeah, it's definitely a large part of who I am today. It's definitely shaped me to be the person that I am, not to sound cliche. And I would definitely say with what's going on in the world right now, it seems to be more on my mind than ever, which I find very interesting. And I did post about that in our NDE group, asking other people if they felt like they were more aware or in tune with their near-death experience with what's going on in the world. And there was an overwhelming response of people who also agreed with that statement.
Well, I want to thank you for joining us today, and I'll see you on the near-death experience group chat at some point in the near future.
Yes, and I would definitely say we'll see you on the other side someday too. We'll all be home.
There's that word again, other side.
I know.
Thank you again for joining us. I'm your host, Lamont Gates, and I want to thank you all for joining me for another edition of Real Spiritual Talk Radio. Please continue to tune in. As I said, this is the first episode of a series of near-death experience accounts that I plan to share with you for the purpose of us all being much more spiritually enlightened. And with that said, Real Spiritual Talk Radio is now signing off.